Uh, this is our agenda, of course. We did our lovely food, drinks, and say hello to everybody. We're going to have Alex, who graciously set all this up from HelloSign, come up and say a few words. And then, yeah. Everyone knows Nick, and this is going to be something special. And then, actually, if anybody after this still wants to have more beverages, of course, you don't have to go home, but you will have to get up out of here at 8 o'clock. And you can either go to 83 Proof, or I think Town Hall also is around here as well. So either one of those two, just make sure you talk to each other before you go, so therefore you're not the only one. So, Alex, I'm going to have you come up and say a few words.
Alex and Arian. We can keep this going. Go ahead. So an IT and product manager walk into a meetup and welcome to HelloSign. See, I told you we ran the times beforehand. I'm Alex Convert. I'm the IT manager here at HelloSign, and this is Arian Solberg. He's one of our product managers. And we are so happy that you guys are here. Macbrained has been immensely helpful for myself. I've only been out in the San Francisco area for about a year and a half. And Jason and all these guys have been like a huge help as we've been navigating this at HelloSign. So we're so glad you're here. We've been trying to host Macbrained for a while. We were at an old office just a couple months ago, and Jason and I have been going back and forth trying to figure that out. And we just moved into this place like a couple weeks ago. So this is our first like real event here, which is awesome. Hopefully the AV stuff starts working. The IT department did all of this in-house. We've nailed a few design parts. Yeah, me. So far, we've only had about a third of the company hit that TV there. So we're open to suggestions. If anyone has any ideas how we could get the other 2/3 to hit it, please let me know after this.
Yeah, 30% conversion rate isn't that great, Alex. We got to get that higher.
We're trying. And we're also doing a little social experiment tonight. So thank you for everyone that sat in a green chair. That means something. Hopefully we'll have results soon, what that does.
Talk to Alex afterwards.
Yeah. You may have noticed we're actually directly across the street from DocuSign, which is our competitor, also not by design. Right. So far, the funniest thing that I've seen is our sales department's right here, and I saw one of our sales guys the other day, like on a wireless Plantronics headset, like looking out the window, like, trust me, I know those DocuSign guys inside and out. I'm looking at them right now.
By the way, when is that military-grade surveillance equipment coming, Alex? We were going to get that from the city of Berkeley, weren't we?
Can't officially talk about that, but. So basically, we are a fast-growing company. We've been around for about 6 years. We started as a YC company and recently closed our Series B round of funding, which is super exciting. And of course, moved into this place too. And what that means is we've always been able to focus on the user end of our product. But most recently, in the last few months, we've really been able to focus on the administration side, which is where Arian comes into play. The two of us have been working close hand for the past couple months to focus on what administrating our product really means and how to do it from an IT perspective, which was so cool that after Jason and I have been talking all this time to host Macbrained, and then we're just launching this like enterprise suite, that we were able to do all of this together at the same time. So part of the reason that we're so excited that everyone's here. So Arian wanted to talk just a little bit about that.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Alex. One of our core core values is active transparency. So I'm just going to come out and say that one of my jobs tonight is to tell you a little bit about the history of the company, and then say a lot of really nice things about IT, and hope that at some point down the road, if you ever have e-signature needs, you'll consider us. So about the company, a lot of you may actually know of us from our first product, HelloFax, which is the product that our co-founders took us through YC with back about 6 years ago or so. Faxing, while it's still going strong today, it's no longer really the focus of the company, I would say. When we introduced signing faxes, that's when we really realized that that was going to become the next product line, because it quickly became one of our most popular features. And that's when HelloSign was born, about 2 years after. We worked on HelloSign for a while. And then we realized that we were getting a lot of interest in the HelloSign API. And this was back about 2013 or so. And so we realized from a business strategy, because the API subscriptions were generating a lot higher revenues, that we really should just focus on that. And as our CEO would say, the strategy of the company should become the legal layer of the internet, almost like the Twilio or the Stripe of e-signatures. And it's also just happens to be an area in which many of our competitors were not doing particularly well. So it really kind of put a lot of tailwinds on our business strategy. And that carried us through until roughly, I would say, about a year ago, where that was really continued to be the core focus. And that was about the time that the company had grown to the point where we were starting to think about our next office move. So this building, for example, was on the horizon. Our recent fundraise was on the horizon. We realized that we now had the resources to kind of branch out and make several, bets in other areas. And so, when I look at where we're at today, and we now have a third product line, by the way, it's HelloWorks, and it's the newest product. And if you've never heard of it, I encourage you to take a look at the video. It's really cool. The best way to describe it is that we took our 6 years of knowledge of document workflows, streamlining business operations, collecting signatures and data, and we kind of boiled it down to the best possible product. What would that look like? And that's what HelloWorks is essentially. So it's also an API first company, an API first product line that we're building a user interface for. But kind of an easy way to describe it is almost like a TurboTax of forms and e-signatures. So it's meant to be a mobile first product where we take the PDF out of the equation. You sign, you fill out a form, potentially a very complex form, but you only see the data that's relevant to you. And while it's still early in its product life cycle, we've seen a lot of potential there, and so we're really excited about it. But getting back to what Alex was talking about, being a product manager here, I am faced with a lot of potential decisions that we can be making and a lot of potential decisions on what business cases I can make to management. And so the way that we do that, first and foremost, is we create these user personas. And the user persona represents who are you building for? What pain points are you solving? And there usually isn't just one, there's actually several. There's usually someone like a buyer, there's usually an implementer, and there's usually an end user. And while this might be obvious to a lot of you here today, the implementer persona is very frequently somebody from the IT department, somebody who's in charge of taking that product and rolling it out to the team, first and foremost, training them and then maintaining it. But what maybe not so obvious, at least to me in the beginning, was that more and more these days, IT is looked to as a key voice in the decision-making process itself. So you guys, with all of your experience looking at vendors day in and day out, you're basically the ones who have, one of the best voices to add to that conversation of who should we actually select in this process. And so what that means is that IT is both the buyer persona for us and the implementer. And so it's kind of important. So as such, when Alex came to me about, what was it, like a year ago?
About February. He's got a very good memory.
And he said, look, Arian, we've got a problem. I couldn't in good conscience represent HelloSign to a large-scale enterprise organization today because it's just too difficult to manage and maintain. So what can we do about that? And so we started talking about SSO. We started talking about SCIM. And we kind of put together the case to create SSO for our HelloSign web app to get the engineering resources to develop it, which we did in about 2 or 3 months or so, and rolled it out, and that's now launched. And now we're in the process of doing SCIM and building the documentation for what I call sort of related services like ADFS, if you happen to be a Microsoft shop, and building relationships with Okta. And so far it's been great, and I think that those efforts and also what we're doing tonight is all kind of part of the same strategy, because our opinion is that to be considered among the most successful cloud companies like Jira and Jamf and G Suite, you really have to have a tight working relationship with not only your own internal IT company, but the IT departments of your customers. And so that's really what we're working towards, what we're trying to do tonight. And also, by the way, security. By the way, calling out Raghav back there, who is another key pillar in the IT arena. and help us all be better than, you know, Equifax, for example. So with that, I want to say thank you for coming. This is really an honor. I've seen the company grow through several stages, and it's great to be here. I'm really looking forward to hearing Nick's talk on Adobe APIs, and if you guys stick around afterwards, you know, come talk to me or Alex, and we can talk IT shop. Thanks for coming.
Definitely. And one more thing, we are hiring a ton right now. We've got like 25 open positions. None for IT right now, but hopefully soon. If someone from HR is listening, soon, hopefully. But right now, a lot of engineering positions. Talk to one of us if you know someone that's interested at the end of this. But again, thanks again for coming, and we'll turn it over to Jason/Nick/whoever wants this.
I think everybody knows the illustrious Nick. An interesting guy. Picture in picture. Keeping it sexy. Hi. Does everybody here like Adobe products? That's good. You should, because they're great products. They actually are great products. This talk is not going to involve me yelling at Adobe for once. This talk is going to involve me talking about the transition we've made using Adobe's tools from tools that sucked to tools that are good. So let's just get that out of the way. I'm not yelling at vendors. I'm yelling about vendors. All right. So first off, this talk is called Decentralized Adobe Management, where we migrated away from our central method of packaging up Adobe stuff and delivering it to people. And everyone's probably here has probably been through that at some point. You've all had to use packaging tools to get your Adobe software out to your users. And frankly, it sucks. And I hate it. So this talk is actually just called Screw Packaging. Because that's basically what I said. One day I just sat there and just got angry at my computer more than usual. I started yelling a lot and throwing things, and I figured they probably wouldn't fire me just yet. They might give me some warning first, so I had a little bit of a leeway. And so let's talk a little bit about some history. In the old days, the ancient days of Creative Suite and Design Web Premium and things like that, we had this method of serialized licensing where you would make all the software installs, and then you'd create this big serialization package, and you drop the serialization package on your machines to serialize any copy of Adobe software that was already on there. Adobe is now transitioning to a new process called named licensing. So this separate license package had some really fun features that everyone loved. For example, it sucked. You install this license package, which installed this binary in a random place that you had to invoke whenever you had to install new software to actually license things. That was bad, right? So that was already kind of annoying, because if you use any kind of normal software management tool, you had to do a lot of extra work. You had to install the package, then you actually had to run the installation binary, which, you know, was terrible. And then my favorite part is how if you uninstalled a single piece of serialized software, the entire license would just disappear like that, and all your software would become unlicensed until you ran the binary again. So that sucked too. So named licensing was Adobe's idea of like, okay, let's get away from the idea of serializing a device. Let's start making this more user specific, right? So they kind of moved into the more modern idea of let's assign software to people, and we'll manage it from the people side. So now the idea behind named licensing is that instead of this being your problem to manage licenses, now it's Adobe's problem. And if there's one thing I'm a really big fan of at Facebook, it's making things other people's problems. So I was happy about this. This is a good change for us. So Creative Cloud Packager. Creative Cloud Packager. All right, so I sat there for a while thinking about the times I had used Creative Cloud Packager. And I tried to think about how I would describe it to somebody who wasn't familiar with it. And
I realized I was having some difficulty coming up with ideas of ways to express how I felt about it. And one of my favorite things about Creative Cloud Packager is how you'd open up the program and you download all this stuff for like 2 hours. You download all this cache data, and it just sucked. And like sometimes it just wouldn't work. You'd get stuck. It wouldn't be able to open for no apparent reason. Sometimes it would not be able to make the packages. You had to make a new package every time a new update came out. Like everything about it just made you want to tear your skin off. And like I ended up yelling a lot. Oh, my favorite part is that you couldn't install Creative Cloud Packager on any machine that also had Adobe software already installed. You had to make it a separate machine or a VM. But of course, you couldn't do it in a VM because if you downloaded all of Creative Cloud software in a VM, your hard drive would run out because the standard VM Fusion is like 40 gigs and all of CCP was like 60. So everything about it was just painful, start to finish. And for the longest time, this was Adobe's perfect solution for enterprise distribution, right? It's terrible. So this is my exact experience trying to use Creative Cloud Packager. And so like, I looked at this picture of me using Creative Cloud Packager. I'm like, man, something's a little weird about this. There's something I just can't quite put my finger on. What's happening? Oh, wait, what's that? Oh, no. That's Creative Cloud Packager in a nutshell, right? So this was the only thing we had to work with, and it was terrible, right? It just hurt. It made my soul cringe. And so now the new hotness that Adobe finally learned after I complained bitterly and publicly shamed them repeatedly in blog posts, and we all yelled and screamed on forums and things like that. And then eventually just nihilism set in and we just kind of dealt with it. They have this thing called the Enterprise Dashboard. Does anybody here use the Adobe Enterprise Dashboard? Okay, it's actually really good. No, honestly, it's actually really good. You move to this new licensing scheme, and you have access to now a single web-based way of managing all the stuff for your users. It shows you all your product lists. It shows you who's assigned, who gets what, things like that. It's actually a really good structure. You can still build packages in here. I don't have a screenshot of it, but there is a way to, on the web, ask the website to build a package for you. It starts a process in the background, and then it sends you a download link as soon as it finishes building for you. So you no longer have to sit there waiting for CCP to come steal your soul. Now you can give your soul away to the cloud for free. So if you have this agreement that supports it, it's kind of like VPP now, right? You can assign a product to an individual account that you've created or that you manage. And then those people will be able to access the software they want through the Creative Cloud desktop application. So from my point of view, right, at Facebook, we've got somewhere around 30,000 clients right now. And any amount of time I have to spend building packages and then distributing out packages to 30,000 nodes is a huge deal. It's a huge deal for me. And I hate it, right? It's a lot of time and effort. So if I can push nearly all of this onto somebody else, like Adobe, and make it their problem, this is a win for me. So yeah, this dashboard, which lets you use these enterprise IDs to sign in. You can sign in with your SSO, SIML, things like that, one login, Okta, whatever you've got. It all works, and it's all really happy. And oh, what's that? Oh, Creative Cloud wants to come hang out with us. Well, Creative Cloud, I don't want you to feel sad, but no, you suck, right? No one likes Creative Cloud. So this new enterprise dashboard, it actually solved nearly all of my complaints about Adobe. They actually listened to the things that we needed from us, and they took this problem out of our hands and made it their own issues. So as a result, they went even further than that. They took the enterprise dashboard and said, you know what would make this even better? What if we just gave you an API? What if you didn't actually ever have to use the website? Because first off, when you've got 100 people, going on a website and managing their accounts, the entitlements, the software, that's really not that big of a deal, right? 1 or 2 people can really take care of that, no problems. When you're talking about 30,000 people, going onto a website to manage account and permissions and who has what, that's, that becomes almost as unscalable of a problem as distributing Creative Cloud packages. So we shifted the problem where I don't have to be angry at Creative Cloud. Now I get to be angry at a website. So this is kind of an improvement for me, but still I'm angry about things. So when they tell me that we have this API available, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll finally stop being angry about something. And so they have this user management API. And as soon as I discovered this, I also discovered they have a lot of really good documentation. I love good documentation. So this documentation is also full of Python code samples. I'm like, oh, I know Python. Python's cool. I can work with this, right? I like Python. And so they even have this GitHub page where they have their own kind of web service you can run out of this Python tool they built, which we don't use in the slightest, but it's cool. And it has a lot of good examples, so it's a good reference. So, you know, they're like our rep is like, hey, this user management API can solve a lot of your issues. You can sync with your Active Directory service. You can get all your accounts pre-created. You can migrate everybody off of this old Creative Cloud packaging with serialized licenses into this new name licensing scheme. And we're like, this is great. Let's just give you a dump truck full of money and make this happen. And we did. And so that's when I said, okay, look, this API is cool. I'm going to take it a step further. I want to get this stuff into Monkey. I want to get this stuff into our self-service tool. That's when I wrote this module called Adobe Tools. I'm really creative, which allows us to serve for clients, allows them to self-serve the things they want from the Creative Cloud system. So this is what Monkey looks like for us in the Adobe category. What you've got here, all these little add Adobe scripts, these are actually all just scripts. They're not actual packages. They're scripts that run these Adobe tools that I created. And what happens is you take this and you pass literally just the name of a product configuration to this script. So I'm like, okay, somebody wants to add animate. The name of the product config is, you know, Adobe Animate CC, whatever. Pass that to this script, which then calls upon this, this helper function called Adobe Tools, which then calls upon the API module that I wrote, which then talks to the Adobe endpoint. And ultimately, like what the user sees is they click a button, they suddenly get an email from Adobe saying, hey, we've added Adobe Animate to your account. They get to log into Creative Cloud Desktop, and it's right there. They got to click the install button. They're good to go. It's easy for users. They don't necessarily have to involve us. It's great for me because they don't have to involve me. So like all the things that I needed to take care of are now done just by having this API access. So the process, there's about 4 pieces to this whole process. All right. So first off, it is Python based, and so it requires a few Python modules on your clients. So if you want to use this, you have to have a way to kind of be able to provide these Python modules into the Python path for your clients. So we already had requests in there, but we had to add the JSON web token and cryptography. You can install it via pip, whatever you want. So the API itself that I wrote, what it does is it queries that user management API directly. Okay, it stores all the data that it gets back from the API into a cache. And I'll talk about why that's important very, very soon. I made some friends at Adobe before I had a cache. This process, basically it keeps the cache for about 2 weeks, or as soon as somebody opens up Managed Software Center interactively, it immediately invalidates the cache and does a recheck so that, you know, if the user chooses to go get something, they'll have up-to-date information about what they already have or don't have. So technical details, right? So this is a Python class that represents a connection to that user management API. And it has a series of exceptions for how it handles various conditions that can happen as a result of this. I'm just gonna run through this, don't mind me. The API class has a couple requirements. So first off, when you set up this Adobe Enterprise Dashboard connection, they call it a connection, you generate an API key, which you use to talk to the enterprise endpoint. And you have to have a private key, which lets you actually talk to that API endpoint, which makes sense. And they give you this config that has like the API key, the path to the private key, and like your organization ID. All makes sense. You need to pass all these in order to be able to talk to the API successfully. And then of course we need to tell it where we're gonna store the cache data. And generally speaking, like who are we talking about, right? So like most things that you're gonna do with the API are about a user. What does this user have? I wanna add a product to a user. I wanna take away a product from a user, things like that. So most of your interactions with this API are going to be about users. So the general flow behind this is that we take the various configs that we got. We take the private key, the user config, we prepare the necessary tokens. We add that to a series of headers that we use to generate all of our requests with. And we send a request to the API endpoint with all these access headers. This all happens in the background. Like you don't need to know any of this. I'm just bragging about how cool this process is because I wrote it. And you're stuck here listening to it anyway, so deal with it. And so I thought about what do I want most often out of this API? Well, obviously I want to make some queries, right? What are the users that I have? What are the products that I have? And like, what have I got? So generally speaking, like the product list doesn't change that often. Adobe doesn't release that many new products that often. So, you know, when they update Photoshop, it's still just Photoshop, right? So this list right here, the first one, doesn't have a lot of churn. That's fine. My user info is just like, who am I? What's my organization? What's my country? And what products do I have? That doesn't change that often either until a user actually wants to, to get something or remove something. The entire user list, you can ask the enterprise, the user management API for everything about everybody, meaning give me all the information about every user I've got and all their products. That's a lot of data. After about like 2 months of making this live, we had something like 12 or 1,300 users. And for a while, every single one of the clients was asking for the entire user collection, all of them. This is an expensive call. You have to, because it paginates it, so you have to go through like something like 70 or 80 pages per client every 2 hours. I'll talk about that in a moment too. Yeah, so I eventually had to remove that feature after Adobe called me and said, we'd really like our endpoint back. So yeah, I kind of let our clients all start asking these questions, and then Adobe product manager gave me a call and said, so there was a time we had an endpoint API. It doesn't work anymore, and all of the IP addresses are from Facebook. Is there something you could do about that? And I said, funny you should ask. So that's when I started thinking about, we should probably cache most of this data, right? We don't want to just have to ask every single time, especially when a lot of it doesn't actually change very often. So obviously we're going to cache the product list, right? It's something that doesn't have a lot of churn. It rarely has any new stuff, so that's easy. User data, right? So obviously the current logged in user, the stuff about the user is probably not going to change very often either. The only things that will change for that user generally are what products the user has, but like the person's information, their name, full name, email are generally fixed information. So if you do ask for the entire user list, let's cache that too. Like there's no reason to keep asking for information we already have. So the cache lasts by default about 2 weeks. And I as of last week, I added a random splay of plus or minus 72 hours. I did that because after our initial call where Adobe is like, please just give us the endpoint back. All right, we'll give you anything. Just give us back the endpoint. I said, okay, sorry about that. I'll put it in a cache, 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, they're like, so all of your clients just hit the endpoint again at the same time. I'm like, wow, I should have thought of that. Damn. Sorry, guys. So now there's a random splay of plus or minus 70. So it's like 6 days, right? So that way, 30,000 nodes aren't all going to go at like 10 a.m. to hit the exact same URL at the same time. So, they're a lot happier now. Great. And so in terms of actions, right, what are the things you actually want to do with this API? Well, you obviously want to be able to add and remove users. So like, in our case, we're using federated users, meaning our users are linked through single sign-on, so they talk to our AD. So you cannot add a user through Facebook to our, to the Facebook Enterprise Creative Cloud unless they're also an AD user. So like, there's some protection there. That also lets us, if we disable an AD account, then likewise your Adobe account is also disabled, right? So it's all kind of linked, which is what you want if you have any kind of directory service. Obviously, we want to be able to add and remove product entitlements. So we want to be able to give people Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign and take it away when they leave. Or just maybe you just don't need it anymore. If you haven't used it in 90 days, there's no reason to have the entitlement. We could just take it away for you. Cool. And then, of course, the very few times that somebody might have a name change or update their country information, things like that. So those are the 3 actions that we can do with this API. Cool. So I wrote this API, and I'm like, man, this is actually kind of a pain in the ass to use. I realized that like I'd made all these features that I might want at some point, but the amount of effort, the amount of lines of code it took to actually instantiate the object and do something with it became kind of overwhelming really fast. So I added a kind of a convenience wrapper around it. That's what the Adobe Tools module is, and just gives you some basic yes/no functions, like does this user exist, true or false? Does this user have a given product, true or false? Things like that. So it makes it a lot easier to use this module when you just ask these queries, simple like that. Because those are the things that I actually want to do. And on top of that, to actually incorporate this into our self-service tool, into Monkey, that's where the Add Adobe script comes in, right? So that's what happens whenever a user clicks on one of the Add Adobe buttons in Monkey, in Managed Software Center. This is the script that it calls. It says, okay, does the current logged in user exist as a federated user? If not, let's go ahead and create the account for them. Cool. Does the current logged in user have this program as an entitlement already? If it does, if it doesn't, add this entitlement to their account. Cool. And then if anything else goes wrong, we use the standard monkey methods of failing, right? So like if it fails to install, then the monkey logs a failure. We have alerting on that. We have tools on that. And then worst case scenario, they can just try again later or just wait 2 hours and it'll happen again. And then we can sort of figure out from there what's going on. But I figure there's really no reason to try and fight how Monkey does this when Monkey gives us all this stuff kind of for free. So the important thing about it is that the cache is actually stateful, right? So every time Monkey runs, it runs these checks. What products do I have? So when the user opens up Manage Software Center, it lists as installed any of the software that they actually already have entitlements for. So they're idempotent and they're like completely stated systems. So the users are very happy to see that like this is an easy way to tell how they can get more stuff and what they already might have in their Creative Cloud accounts. Cool. And so this is both an upside and a downside, right? Creative Cloud Desktop app is the portal for which users have to use to actually get the software. They have to open up Creative Cloud Desktop app, sign in, and then any entitlement they have will be listed as an install button in there. So they have to take the step of clicking the install button, which then downloads it straight from Adobe onto their machine and installs it. Creative Cloud Desktop keeps it up to date for me, so I don't have to push out updates, right? So both a pro and a con, like I don't have to worry about updating the software. Adobe will do it for me. It also goes to the internet, not to our intranet. So in terms of bandwidth control, I only have to worry about traffic shaping going out to the WAN, right? So like that's easy to do. There's like the network team has all kinds of ways of managing traffic going out to the internet. One of the issues that we had early on is that if I pushed out updates to Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator stuff all at the same time, we're pushing like 30 to 40 gigs to every client in the span of a couple hours, and I took New York offline, and the network team got really mad at me. Whoops. We lost South America. That was bad. They're like, we need Brazil back. Yeah, we need to turn this off. I really want Brazil back. Sorry, guys. We actually melted the firewall. The firewall utilization, CPU utilization spiked so hard that the whole thing crashed for like 3 hours. Yeah, I had a fun talk with the network team that day. Boy, they had a fun present for me at their desk. So like at the end of all this, okay, we have this nice decentralized system where we utilize the clients to do all the work for me. They just run a series of scripts through this module and they get what they want. I don't really have to do anything to manage this, right? It's all being done automatically through these tools, through this API, through this system, which is great. So the good news is that the users are self-sufficient at this point, right? They can do whatever they want. They don't have to necessarily ask anybody for permission or for access. If it's in Managed Software Center, they can get it just like that, and it's cool, right? So the best part is that we also gave Help Desk access to the enterprise dashboard. So the Help Desk, if somebody has a problem, Help Desk can actually help set up their account, add and remove entitlements. Cool, good to go. And yeah, I don't have to do anything anymore. And the best part is that like I don't have to ever look at CCP ever again, right? So like every once in a while, I open it up and just give it the middle finger. Like, yeah, take that. All right, so okay, there's some bad news though, right? Some of which I covered, right? So first off, you have to ship some Python modules that are not part of the standard library. So if you don't have a way to do that, you have to make one in order to use this. The other downside is that this API is super user only, right? There's only one API key, and it's an all or nothing access. So anybody with this API key could potentially interact with anyone else on the API. So they have the ability, if they wanted to, either unintentionally or intentionally, anybody who tried hard enough could delete everybody else's accounts, could remove people's entitlements. I thought about this as a risk, and we decided ultimately that it's not that big of a deal. Because first off, we specifically tell everybody, don't use Creative Cloud storage, right? Like we don't want you to store company data on Creative Cloud storage. We have better storage options internally than what they offer, right? So worst case scenario, what will happen if someone just deletes all your entitlements? Well, you open up Photoshop and it says, hey, you don't have this entitlement anymore. You have 7 days to relicense it before we just stop working, right? So worst case scenario, someone's kind of annoyed for a little bit, right? They have to go back and click the buttons, or Help Desk has to go and fix their account. So like if somebody does go on a rogue deleting spree, like it's not that big of a deal. We can deal with it. It's not a huge loss. There's no permanent data loss. Nothing like that's gonna happen. So I conclude that was an acceptable risk. I've asked as a feature request for Adobe to provide us granular access with the API. I like a read-only access kind of thing. That would be helpful. We'll see if they ever get around to that. And also, like you might hear like the soft, the soft crooning sadness of CCP in the background. Be like, please love me again. I'm like, no one loves you. All right, so Adobe is really enthusiastic about this. I don't know if any of you saw the TechCrunch article that I was featured in. Yeah, bragging about this product. So yeah, like this was good stuff, right? They were happy to see a company jump on board with this API that they created that provided to us, and I was really happy that I had a way to basically avoid all of the crap Adobe had flung at us for the last 10 years. So yeah, that cache, right? In the first version I put on GitHub, which you can still find if you look in the history, there was no cache. Every client made a query every time Monkey ran. And Monkey runs every, between 1 or 2 hours or so. And every client was also downloading the entire user list. So every client, when I started doing the calculations, was making about 95 API calls every 2 hours. When we started doing the math on how many of our nodes were actually hitting that when they wanted to, all the nodes that were capable of doing so were generating more than like 400 to 500 a day, okay? So that was already the first problem. That was mitigated somewhat by the fact that initially, we did not ship all the Python modules to every client. So initially, you actually couldn't get it to work in MSC until you hit a certain button, okay? So that was because of cryptography. The cryptography module is a weird one that has to be compiled on the OS that you're shipping it to, because it links against SSL in a very specific way. And because of that, you can't send a 10.12.5 cryptography to a 10.12.6 machine. It just doesn't work, okay? It fails. So I didn't really feel like fixing that at the time. It was a lot of work. I was like, whatever, it's fine. If they want to fix it, they click this button that says, please fix my Adobe API, and then they'd be able to install everything. It would work fine. So what that meant, though, is that every client that tried to access this API was generating an error in Monkey, saying, I can't access the API. I'm just going to ignore it. And that was happening, of course, every 2 hours. So every client was now generating like 80 errors, every 2 hours, which eventually I got tired of that. So thankfully, I got my hands on, I talked about that. I got my hands on someone really helpful, Mike Lynn, also known as Frogger, who's a very helpful member of the community who's really good at Python. And we kind of worked on how we tried to figure out how could we get this cryptography module actually successfully shipped to all of our clients, whatever state they could be in, whatever OS they're in, whatever other things like that. We want to be able to ship cryptography without also messing with their system Python. Because I learned really, really early on that if you have a company full of engineers and you touch their Python, ooh, boy, do they get salty. Boy, man, whew. That was like rolling around on the beach after going through a glass factory. Oh, God, it was no good, all right? So they got really upset when I was like, let's manage all the pip systems. No, don't do that. So we realized we found a way, like he wrote a script that maybe someday we'll publish if we're nice, to automatically, that we can export Python modules and all their dependencies into a shippable, packageable format. So we finally did that. We fixed that. We shipped out the cryptography module to every single client. This meant that every client that was previously failing at talking to the API, all of a sudden it could see the light. This right here is an infographic of how I got Frogger to fix this. I just dangled some Python in front of him and he just kind of wandered by and it's like, ooh, Python. And then, yeah. So that solved my problem for me right there. I took at least like 10 minutes to make this illustration, so please appreciate this. This is really hard to do in Keynote. Okay, like this is not like MS Paint. So like we had about 25,000 clients that now all of a sudden they're like, ooh, the API is available. Everybody go, go, go. And yeah, it was a scary process, but I figured it wouldn't be that bad, right? Like they could handle it. They didn't handle it. So right here is the graph that Adobe sent me of our API requests. That right there is when I shipped that change. It peaked at about 2,000 requests a minute. This is just in the first hour. This hasn't even been an hour since I've shipped it yet, and we're hitting 2,000 requests a minute. This right here is when they finally fixed the rate limiter, because we hit them so hard, their automatic throttling system gave up, okay? We had 25,000 clients all saying, give me the API list. And their rate limiter was supposed to throttle you after a certain number per minute, like just got overwhelmed and just couldn't throttle anymore. We broke the throttler, and then we broke the system. The endpoint fell down, and all the clients couldn't talk to it anymore, so that's why they stopped. And finally, they called me, and I turned it off. So this is a graph of what it looks like when you get Facebook, all right? So yeah, that was in hindsight, kind of a poor design decision on my part, right? So that's why like when you start writing Python modules that talk to endpoints, it's important to be considerate of your neighbors. people get a little bit salty when you suddenly take all of their endpoint APIs and use them all for yourself. Keep in mind, this endpoint is used by every company everywhere. So this meant we took it for everybody, like all over the world, universities, companies, businesses, yeah, there were some tears going on there. So Adobe was a little bit less enthusiastic about this. And as a result, there's now a cache. So I implemented this cache, and like I said earlier, I didn't originally have a splay, so the same thing happened again 2 weeks later, which, yeah, I should have thought of that. Now there's this random timer, so we don't have as many issues with that, but that's how the module works. Cool. Here's some links if you want to know stuff about it. I'll post these online. Otherwise, that's Facebook.
Are there any questions for Nick?
Don't ruin this for me, Wes.
I actually just wanted to say thanks. I don't think there's a lot of people haven't said thanks enough for like a bunch of the open source contributions recently, and like a lot of work that everybody puts in for everybody else. So on behalf of everybody that's here, thank you so much for putting all the time and effort in open sourcing this. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So you said under the API, you can go ahead and anybody can de-enroll anybody.
Correct.
Do you get charged when they get the entitlement or when they download it?
So I work for a money tree. So, like we just give Adobe like a dump truck full of money every year, and we just have unlimited everything. So like from our point of view, it's not really that big of a deal, right? So we have unlimited. So let me qualify that. We get charged per entitlement, right? So if a user takes entitlements they don't actually use, we still pay for it. So if a user decides, I want Photoshop and InDesign and Illustrator and all that, we got to pay for that at the end of the year, right? So our agreement lets us provide as many copies as we want, then we just have a true up at the end of it. So we're looking at systems where we manage that a little bit more carefully, and I don't want to talk about it on the air. Ask me that afterwards, and I'll tell you some details about how we do that. But yes, that is an issue. If you give people entitlements, you do have to pay for them. During the true up only. So if you give it to them and then they decide they give it up later, there's no payment for that. But like if they keep it and they use it, then that's what you end up paying for. Which Adobe, that's the kind of the model Adobe wants, right? They're moving to a subscription kind of model where they want longtime users who need the software to continue to use it as much as they want, and they just pay for the license for it.
Okay. Are you doing anything to migrate installs before you implement all this? Those serialized installs? Are you just waiting for those to fix themselves by people getting new machines?
No, that was nuking from orbit. Yeah, before I turned on the API, I forced uninstalled it from everyone's machines. It also generated some salt, let me tell you. But yeah, I probably should have timed that a little bit differently. But I was like, you know what? I'm done with this crap. Mostly because of Adobe setup error 79. Which if anybody who's ever tried to install like Adobe Acrobat silently, you just get this random, totally inscrutable error that in the logs that has no understanding for why it's failing. It just fails. And our monkey warnings were just off the charts, constantly people trying to install Adobe products that were failing with this mysterious setup error. And I said, that's it. I'm done. Screw it. Screw you. Screw everything. And they all got forced uninstalled. So no, we did not migrate. We nuked them all from orbit and said, if you want Adobe software, you go here. That's your only option. I'm not a people person. They don't usually let me out of the basement. So this is like my first time in a while, so thank you.
From Mikey. How amazing is your team getting, and why isn't he doing his boot camp homework?
So I like to thank my teammates who have all sat through this with me, and we've all suffered this together. And I would very much like to thank Mike Lynn for his helping blow up the API. Because when we fixed the Python modules for everybody, we blew up Adobe, we blew up ourselves, we blew up everybody. It was hilarious. So thank you for that, Mr. Mike Lynn. And yeah, it is a team effort. Like I sat up here and took all the credit because I'm the one who's standing here talking, so I get to do that. But there's a lot of work that goes into all this, and it's not just me. It's, you know, it takes a lot of engineering effort on the community's part. And like one of the things that I really like about this community is how much we share open source. And one of the perks of being at Facebook is that I get to work on complicated problems. And sometimes these complicated problems require creative solutions. And being able to come up with these creative solutions and having people work on them together and then share them with each other is what makes all of our tooling so great. We have access to really cool tools. And I don't think any other IT community has nearly as much cool stuff to play with as we do. And that's because we foster a sense of sharing and community together, and that's what makes this all cool. So like, I'm happy to share this because it solves a problem for us. Maybe it'll solve a problem for you too. I have used many tools other people have made that will solve problems for them, that solves a problem for us as well. So keep sharing, keep doing stuff.
Any other questions prior to response?
I'll yell at them first.
Well, awesome. Thank you. A huge thank you to Nick.
Thank you.
He did just say the first day we fixed it, it was so amazing.
That's awkward.
I was waiting for him to do something weird.
4, 5, 4. Wait, hold it. I got this. I don't got this.
Combination of
4, 5, 4, 7, 2, 7. 188, 4, 5, 4, 7, 2, 7. I'm not going to the computer. Sorry.
So we are still looking for speakers, still looking for hosts. So I want to put it out there. We're starting to line up 2018 currently right now for potential venues and potential hosts. So if you do have a conference coming up, say like Macaduck, and you want to practice that talk beforehand, please sign up. That is actually in February of next year. So sign up. A huge thank you to Alex and to HelloSign. Amazing space, amazing people, amazing time. So thank you so much. And kind of like the standard who, what, where, why, this probably will be our last Macbrained for the year, only because of the holidays coming up, November, December. It makes it a little difficult to kind of do events as everyone has this thing called life happening. And they like to travel and see family that they regret seeing eventually because it's the holidays. So, you know, it's fun times. And the month of October, we'll see if anything does come up during that time. Right now, there is nothing there at the moment. So we already have January and February and March lined up for next year. So at least for the first quarter, we will have 3 back-to-back events for everybody. All right. So otherwise, thanks so much for coming tonight. We appreciate you coming and hanging out. Remember, I think is in a few minutes at 8 o'clock, you don't got to go home, but you can't stay here. So you guys enjoy. Thanks so much for coming, and we'll see you guys soon. Take pizza. Sorry, people on the stream, no pizza for you, but pizza for Nick and for Frogger.
I started yesterday. It's like, it's fine, I got this. I'm gonna use one actually. It took 45 minutes. I'm gonna do it half an hour this time. These are awesome. Word bus for models.